Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about status effect implementation. Why am I talking about this? Somebody recently said, hey, I really liked your Quest implementation video. And I'm like, I haven't really done like a kind of a more nitty-gritty implementation video in a while. So let me talk about this. Status effects are what I call any effect that's placed on an object in the world. It's usually a creature. Like, you may throw a dot on a creature, so every now and then they have fire on them, and every now and then they take fire damage. But not always. You might throw a spell on a door that says this door is being held, like in place, like a hold portal spell from D&D. Or you may summon a weapon, or you may summon a zombie. And all those are what I call status effects because they place an effect in the world that usually has a particular running time, and then it cleans it up. I've done this I've written status effect systems for Fallout and Arcanum and Pillars. They're usually very similar. So I'm going to talk about how to code them at a very high level. If you like the Quest implementation video, which I'll link below, it's kind of like that one. The exact data structures that you're going to use really depend on your system. And by system, I mean the engine you've chosen to use and the game you're making. Because I would do different things depending on how your game handles maps and objects, and even whether you're making turn-based combat or not. And I'll get into all that. Usually when you, however, create a data structure for a status effect, it's going to have to include a number of things that I think were in every status effect system I ever made. That data structure usually has the target object, which is usually a creature, but not always. Sometimes it's like I said, it may be a door, maybe a tree. Sometimes it's a location, like you may put a glyph down and anybody who walks into it takes damage. So that status effect is placed on a location. There's usually a caster. It's often the player, maybe an enemy. There's source information. Where do I go? Like when I need to look up information about this status effect when I'm running it, where do I go? Did it come from a spell? Did it come from an item? Did it come from a creature that's just a creature ability? And then any data you need to manage it from moment to moment, which is usually its tick rate, how much time is remaining, pointers to objects associated with this status effect. Like if you summon a zombie, you're going to have to keep a pointer on that zombie. Then when you have that structure, you really need to make 3 distinct methods that are associated with it. I call them begin, tick, and end. Begin is when you actually create the status effect. So you create a new one and add it to a list. Where's that list kept? Well, it depends on your system. And again, your engine and the game you're making. Sometimes you want a master list of every status effect that is currently active. Sometimes you will keep those lists, though, separated. They're kept on the creature or the object that has it on them, or they're kept on the caster who created it. So here's every status effect created by this particular caster. Or you may have a list of the ones that are you may do that, and then for ones that are in the world, you can maintain a world list. And the reason for this is it depends on how they tick, which I'll talk about when I get to the tick part. So you're still creating the stat effect. You have to create any objects that are associated with it. You may summon 3 zombies. You're going to create 3 distinct zombie objects and keep track of them here. But you may also have to create anything that's part of the UI UX for this status effect. A sound may start. Icons may appear on the UI somewhere. There may be particle effects associated with this thing. There may be something on the ground, or there may be swirling, or there's just smoke or whatever. You'll have to create those things and then keep references to them in this status effect, this running data structure for the status effect, so you can maintain them and then clean them up. So let's get into the tick part, because that's kind of the meat of a status effect. Is periodically, and it depends on your system how often this periodically is, you have to tick the status effects. They get an update. Now, if you have a master list, if you just decided to keep a list of all status effects that are active in the world, great. That list can get an update, and just check to see if any of the status effects on that list need an update. Otherwise, if you're keeping them on creatures or objects or on the world and there's an associated world status effect list, those things need updates. How you do them depends on what kind of status effects you're making. If you're making a real-time game, you probably want to call that update every game update, which is usually associated with your frame rate, or if you use Unity, there's a update function. We used to call it heartbeats. Those happen really rapidly, and then you check to see if anything on your list needs an update. I've found the most efficient way to do this is you sort your list by the thing that needs the next update. And there may be multiple things. So then when time advances a little bit and you call back to the update, everything at the beginning of the list that needs an update is handled. And then as soon as you get to the thing that doesn't need an update, because they're sorted by when they need an update, there's nothing else left on the list. So you can usually do that really quickly. If you're making a turn-based game, like turn-based combat, then what you usually do is you either maintain a master list, and then it's checked every turn. So every time it becomes a new turn, you check everything on that master list to see if it needs to be updated. Or status effects are kept on the creature. For example, if you cast a dot on someone, the dot may go on the creature. And then every turn that creature gets, that dot activates. Or you may keep it on the caster. So every status effect that a caster is responsible for out in the world is handled when the caster gets his update. Really depends on the status effects. For a dot, I'd probably keep it on the target. For a hold portal on a door, I'd probably keep it on the caster. And then when its time expires, it has a reference to the door and it goes out and takes it off. So the things you do on a tick, which I've kind of touched on already, is you definitely need to check the time remaining on that status effect and decide if it's time to remove it, which is the third thing I'm going to talk about, ending a status effect. Otherwise, you do maintenance associated with that status effect. Like I mentioned, applying damage over time. But some effects change over time. Their size may change. They may start big and shrink, or they may expand. You've got to manage that here. They may, in addition to changing size, they may change damage type. You may have something that starts off, with a electrical bolt and electrifies everything here, but then a fire ring spreads out. So you have to manage that here in the tick portion of your status effect system. And then of course the UI gets updated. Maybe your UI shows how many seconds are remaining on either a spell the caster threw or a dot that's on a creature or whatever. So if you can see that icon, there may be a bar going down, it may be changing color, it may be changing shape, whatever you need to do to maintain that UI. And also sounds may change, so you've got to do that here in the tick. And then the third important part of a status effect is the ending of the status effect. This is where you clean up any ancillary objects, like you may have summoned 3 zombies. They get killed when the status effect ends. It may leave, if they're dead, it may leave the dead body. If they're still running around, I shouldn't say they're alive, they're unalive, then it may have them fall over and die, or they may just disappear. That you decide what effect you want to do, and you do that here in the end tick for the status effect. You also clean up the UI, and you finally remove the status effect from whatever list you were keeping it on, either a master list or the ones by creature or by object or by world. Here's the really important thing that you have to remember when you're doing this. This end for a status effect can be called from a lot of different places. It is frequently called from the tick method, because the tick started and it went, oh, the time has expired on the status effect, end it. So you may call tick and then tick calls end. However, lots of other things may call end. A creature may die, and therefore the status effects that are on it, if it had a dot on it, you may want to remove it. Or a caster may die, and you may have a rule saying any spells that caster is maintaining get wiped. This is where you do it. And that means that the death of a target or the death of a caster may end a status effect. So that end status effect may be being called from a lot of places. And you have to make sure that no matter where it's called, it's safe to do it. When a map is left and all the objects on that map are being destroyed, any associated status effect is probably also destroyed. Although I'll talk in a second really briefly about what you want to do if you want to load save those. So make sure that your end tick can be called from a wide variety of places in your game safely. That's it. You got to think about that when you write it. What are you referencing in that? Make sure those objects are still valid. So that's the begin tick end methods. Status effects are awesome, and you can see by the way I've just generally described them, you can use them for a ton of things. These can be what primarily are the engine that run abilities and spells and traps in your world. All kinds of things can really, under the hood, be a status effect. Be careful though. Status effects are so versatile that they're frequently easy to abuse. And they tend to get abused because people go, oh, we already have a status effect for this. Can I also do this? A typical example may be, I warned you, like when you leave a map and things get destroyed, you may find people going, well, I don't want it to be destroyed. If I cast Hold Portal on that door, and then I go down to the next dungeon level, and if I come back up, if it's still within that 10-minute time limit, I will still want that there. Which means you have to save off that status effect with the time it was the player was leaving that map, and then when you re-enter the map, you have to somehow reload that status effect as a delta difference on that map and check to see if A, the caster is still alive, and B, if the timer's expired. And then call potentially a tick or an end when it's safe to do so on that door. So you have to make sure that door's been loaded. Be careful. Saving status effects can be difficult. It depends on how you kept the list. Is it a master list? Is it a list on the object? Is it a list on the caster? The biggest issue I had with saving status effects were with the associated objects. The target, the caster, and anything that any object that may have been summoned, even if it's like a particle effect object. If you made fog, if you cast a wall of fog and then you jumped off the map and you came back and that wall of fog should still be active, it's got to be reconstructed. That object, you'd have to recreate that wall and figure out where it was and how it's oriented. It might be that it was saved when you left the map, and then you just have to reattach the status effect to it. It's like, oh, there's that wall of fog that I created. When the map is reloaded, I'm gonna reattach it. Or you may have to reconstruct it. I may have to create an object, orient it, and reconnect to it. It really depends on your system. I'm just warning you that the save and load on status effects were probably one of the more difficult things of saving and loading. I have a whole video, by the way, on saving and loading. I recommend you watch it. I will link it below. Anyway, without going into details on any one system, that is a very high-level description of how you should write status effects for your RPGs, and I hope any of you who are making a status effect system found this useful.